let's move on to this Inspector General report that was published yesterday by DOJ IG Michael Horowitz, a familiar name to a lot of people because he published an Inspector General report on some of the Russia collusion, FISA application malfeasance that happened surrounding Carter Page and all of that stuff, and was popular on the right because of that report. Rightfully so, because it was a good report and needed to be done. But this next one may be slightly less popular with the right. It was published yesterday and found that the Department of Justice under Donald Trump and his Attorney General Bill Barr improperly spied on members of Congress, congressional staffers, and actually journalists as well in an effort to track down who was selectively leaking. We can put the first element up on the screen. This is a report from Politico. The headline is "Watchdog Faults DOJ in Trump's First Term for Secretly Obtaining Records of Lawmakers and Journalists." It's a little bit more complicated than just having done it secretly, and we can go through some of the Inspector General report, Ryan, because I think it's fairly important now that we have another Trump administration suiting up. And before we do start going through it, we can put it up on the screen here. This is the E2 tear sheet. You can see the PDF of the report itself. You can go through it yourself. It's very long, but very long and very detailed, sort of step-by-step process of how warrants were obtained or obtained poorly or improperly in many cases. But essentially, the Trump-era Justice Department was doing something that was, I think, perfectly reasonable and understandable for the Attorney General to do, which is track down the selective leaks that were coming out of classified information weaponized against Donald Trump. We now know for sure, and we knew this at the time in many cases, that these selective leaks were giving a very false picture of what was happening with Carter Page. They were leaking to show that Carter Page and others were like definitively involved in some strange plot, like ripped from a Clancy novel about Russia collusion, that just, the there wasn't there. And so Bill Barr was trying to track down who was leaking this classified information. His deputies were trying to track down who was leaking this classified information. So in the process, though, the DOJ was not following the proper channels that you need to, reading this report, one reason it's kind of an interesting read is that the bureaucratic process of obtaining these warrants is insane.
Which it should
as
be.
It should be.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely, 100% as it should be. Were you going to say something, Ryan?
No, just, yeah. Like, Eric Holder put this in to place actually after the DOJ basically spied on James Rosen, the Fox News White House correspondent, who was working on a story with a source regarding North Korea's kind of something involving North Korea, and they swept up his communications, and the entire media, left to right, stood up to Eric Holder and said, "This is outrageous." Many of us called on him to resign over that, including us over at the Huffington Post. And in response to that pressure, he put in this new policy that if you're going to pick up the communications of a journalist, even if it's incidental in a report on or investigating a cartel or something, if you see a journalist there, you need to come to the Attorney General himself and make your case that this breach of our norms, because it's just norms. Legally, if they get a warrant, they can go after anybody they want. But the norms are that journalists are to be protected. So they've set up these special protections that also cover members of Congress, which to me I think are also good. Like members of Congress, whether you're Marjorie Taylor Greene or Adam Schiff or AOC, I think should be off limits.
Dana Rohrabacher. Yep, absolutely. So let's get into what Horowitz found a little bit here. We'll start on page 5. We can put the next element up. He says he found that the department failed to convene the News Media Review Committee. They have a committee to review such things, to consider the compulsory process authorization requests. The department did not obtain the required DNI certification in one investigation, and we were unable to confirm whether the DNI certification it obtained in another investigation was provided to the Attorney General before he authorized the request, and the department did not obtain the Attorney General's express authorization for the NDOs that were sought in connection with compulsory process issued in the investigations. So that's from the executive summary, basically. But yeah, on this next element, you can see they're talking specifically about the New York Times and the Washington Post. CNN is swept up in this. They say, as we describe in this chapter, it's chapter 3 of the report, the department complied with some, but not all, of the then applicable provisions of the news media policy in CNN and New York Times and Washington Post, many of which provisions have been put in place beginning just 6 years earlier. That's what Ryan was referencing from 2014 and 2015, which Horowitz references a lot in this report. He says, in our judgment, this deviation from the department's own requirements indicates a troubling disparity between, on the one hand, the regard expressed in department policy for the vital role of the news media in American democracy. Yes, I know the DOJ loves that so very much. And on the other hand, the department's commitment to complying with the limits and requirements that it intended to safeguard that very role. So basically, if you go into the report, what happens with these journalist communications? These are non-content communications requests. So they're trying to pull who the journalists were emailing and calling. And that in and of itself would be enough, obviously, to figure out who's leaking. And that's why you need to have the provisions that were put in place followed, because it's a very serious thing when you're looking at who journalists are talking to. Like, it should be the absolute highest standard. And so when we have potentially Kash Patel coming into the FBI and a loyalist like Pam Bondi coming into the DOJ, Bill Barr was kind of a loyalist, but ultimately really bucked Trump. So imagine what a loyalist who's even sort of more MAGA than Bill Barr might do in some of these situations, even if they're kind of swampy, like Pam Bondi legitimately is. These are like really serious things, really serious powers that I would just tell the right can and will be abused against conservative media, little guys. Like imagine right. The slippery slope as these powers start getting abused, because there are, and it always happens this way, there are rightful uses of these powers when selective leaks of classified information that can damage national security, literally can. That's a reasonable use of trying to figure out who is leaking. I don't think it's necessarily a reasonable use of going after journalists' communications, but it may be a reasonable predicate for an investigation, and it is what convinces you to let those powers get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger.
And right, exactly. And these norms get loosened in a ratchet effect. It moves one direction and only tends to move in one direction. So let's say, well, Adam Schiff is one of the members of Congress that they spied on here, and Swalwell. Let's say you hate Adam Schiff.
And Kash Patel, by the way.
And Kash Patel.
Yep. 21 Democrats and 20 Republicans.
And Kash Patel is a great example here. So take Adam Schiff. You hate Adam Schiff. You think he's a traitor. You think he should be spied on. He's now an incoming senator. If there's a Democratic administration in the next 10, 15 years, he's going to be likely CIA chief.
Yeah.
He's going to be pissed. You spied on him. You want him with all these powers? Now he can spy on you in reverse. So that's my message to the right. Now, the message to the left would be like, all right, you spied on Kash Patel, the left.
Democrats.
You spied on Kash Patel when he was a Hill staffer. Now he's going to be running the FBI, and he's pissed. And he's very pissed. Like, he has sued everybody involved. His case got thrown out, but he's like, guy's angry, as he should be. You don't spy on a Hill staffer. And so now he's going to run the FBI. Look what you did. So don't do this stuff.
Yeah, it's serious. I mean, it is really serious when you start when you let the precedent slip like this and don't get caught until there's an Inspector General report a long time later. And part of this is you're supposed to give reporters enough time to respond, and that wasn't done in all of these cases. To actually have a legal response to their communications being pulled to the government as journalists. I mean, right now we've seen how crucial independent media has been, and independent voices in Congress, like people who are willing to buck the party line. We've seen how important that is to understanding. Like Kash Patel, as Matt Taibbi came on Undercurrents last week and made this point, he was like, the Nunes memo that we were told by selective leaks, by the way, was absolutely wrong, was vindicated, and Kash Patel was basically the author of the Nunes memo. Those independent voices have been like really important to understanding what's going on. When nobody else in the Republican Party wanted to really talk about how bad the FBI were hesitant to question the Russia investigation. Initially, it's easy to forget there was even hesitation on the right about that, but there was. These independent voices in Congress and in the media are some of the more important voices right now. There's a lot of like literal disinformation coming from the establishment, and so as soon as these powers sort of slip into getting bigger and bigger without proper oversight, then guess who's coming after independent media? It'll be Adam Schiff, it'll be Eric Swalwell, it'll be those types of people, or maybe even like on the right. I think right now people on the right are primed to overuse these powers because they have good reason to want to know what happened. And that's how things end up getting expanded in very bad directions, because it's easy to convince people you should be going after and you should be using this power. And so you sort of feel like you have permission to make the power broader and broader.
Yeah, got to protect what's left of this republic.
Let's do it.
Hey, if you liked that video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to Breaking Points.
If you want to see the rest of Counterpoints, go to breakingpoints.com to become a premium member and get the full uncut show every morning in your inbox and on Spotify.